Thanks everybody for attending, for all of you who are currently in the room and entering the room. My name is Kelly. I'm with the Colorado Office of Film, Television, and Media, and we've been putting on this webinar series to just keep the community engaged during this COVID time and try to, share some skills and just learn from each other about how everybody's staying connected and busy via remote work and everything else. So thanks for joining. If you want to see the other webinars that we have coming up, you can go to coloradofilm.org/webinar-series. And other than that, I just want to say welcome especially to, I think, Front Range Community College and Colorado Mountain College. I believe we've got some students in here. And for all of you who are out there, please know also that you can ask questions during the session, and we're going to be taking questions as we go along. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen and you see Q&A, you can click on Q&A and submit a question at any time. And then when there's a good opening, I'll kind of interject and ask your question for you. So feel free to do that whenever. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our awesome guests from Deck 9 Games. We have Sylvia Gregory, Webb Pickersgill, did I say that right?
Yep, you got it right.
And Corwin Cantin, which I think I said right too. Awesome. All right, thank you guys. And Webb, I think you're going to kick it off, so go for it.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. This is great. This is the first time I've done this webinar series style on Zoom. So I'm used to seeing like a huge panel of faces off to the right, and I only see 4. So I don't know who's out there or whatever, but thank you again for coming. One thing I would like you to do while we're getting ready is in the Q&A, if you don't mind just chiming in, just giving us an idea of what angle you're coming at this from. Are you an animator? Are you a producer? Are you an actor? Just so I have an idea, Kelly, if you could gather those up and just give me an idea of kind of what the spread of our audience is, then we can actually tune this to address your questions kind of preemptively. If I know that I've got a ton of animators, I can kind of lean that direction, or actors or whatever. So,
this question was already Vicon question mark.
Oh, are you guys seeing the, oh, there is.
Yeah, they're all coming in right now. We got actors,
sweet. Okay.
DP.
I can look at it myself. All right.
A lot of actors.
Nice.
Cool.
Can see names too. All right, great. Blade. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, awesome. I'll just keep an eye on that also. So, okay. There's a link here. You can ignore that. We're going to actually watch this together in a little bit. But welcome to Introduction to MoCap. This is going to be a lot of fun. These are a few of our fun people here that work in the office. And somebody's car horn. Okay, there we go. Let's jump in. Let's see. There we go. Just the structure for this afternoon. First, we'll do some quick introductions. We'll talk just generally, what is MoCap? What does that actually mean as far as this conversation goes? We'll talk about our basic workflow at Deck 9 Games, being everything from when we write the script all the way through the final game that gets output at the other side. Obviously, MoCap will be a central piece to that and how everything relates to it, but we do want to give you an overall idea of how that fits within our pipeline. We'll actually specifically go through the roles, specific roles that are in our motion capture room and what those people do in order to pull off a motion capture shoot. We'll also discuss the casting process. I see there are quite a bit of actors in the room today. So this is a question that's come up. Oh, what if I want to be in a game? What is that? What do I do? Well, we'll tell you about what that process is, and we'll give you details about that. We'll also walk you through a production day. Essentially, when you come in, what happens, and then how does that whole process work, and how does that compare maybe to film or theater? And then we'll give you a little bit of insight into our post-production. So once we are done shooting our motion capture, it then disappears into the pipeline of various other people that then finish it up and put it into our game. And that portion should take us, I don't know, we'll see, an hour, maybe a little less. And at that point, we will open it up for an actual final Q&A, and that will eat up the remainder of our time. But like Kelly said earlier, I'm happy to entertain any question as we go, specifically if it helps clarify what we're saying. Corwin and I specifically we're like hive mind, so we use a lot of shortcuts. We say things that we know because we say them all day, every day, and we're not necessarily thinking that not everybody knows what that means. So stop us if there's a term or we gloss over something that you need to clarify in order to really understand what we're saying. So that's that. All right, let's move on. Deck 9. Who is Deck 9? Deck 9 Games. We've been in business for about 23 years. In fact, we celebrated our 23rd anniversary on April 1st. Our owner, Mark, says that it's kind of fun to be an April 1st birthday for the studio. It's easy to remember. But we've been in business for 23 years. The company started out in traditional gaming, and we started out under the business name Idle Minds. If you've heard of Idle Minds before, it's the same company. We just rebranded about 6 years ago. We decided to shift out of traditional gaming. And when I mean traditional gaming, I mean, it's the run, jump, shoot, high score, your typical games that you would get on, like, let's say PlayStation, something like that. But they made a deliberate change to shift over to narrative-based gaming. So instead of what your high score is, or what your leaderboard is, or how many player kills you could get, any of those kinds of things, they wanted to shift to creating games that told stories as the core game mechanism. So how you actually interact with the other characters changes the fundamental game itself. Basically, a choose your own adventure, if any of you are old enough to know what those are. The choose your own adventure books where you're reading a novel, and then it says, oh, if you want to jump off the cliff, turn to page 15, and you turn to page 15, and it says, well, you slid down and now you discovered a secret cave. Oh, awesome. So we wanted to shift to games that kind of digified that choose your own adventure experience and made it into a visual interactive experience. And our first game created under Deck 9 Games, we started working on it about 6 years ago, is Life is Strange Before the Storm. We partnered with Square Enix, who is a very large publisher. They're a worldwide publisher, but we worked with their London office. And we released this game. And it was really exciting. I was a fan. I was like one of the first buyers of the original Life is Strange. So when it came up that we'd possibly be able to work on a sequel, or in this case, a prequel to the Life is Strange franchise, it was super exciting for me and for the team. And that excitement paid off because we ended up winning a bunch of awards. It was released in 2017. And after it came out, the 2018 award cycle in the industry, we won a variety of industry awards, including a 2018 Webby Award. Got to go out to New York. That was a lot of fun, and receive Webby Awards for Best Writing, Best Public Service and Activism. This is one thing to make note, is that we make games that, again, aren't just action oriented and just goal oriented. We actually try to write stories that have meaning, tell story, and touch on very important and contemporary social situations. So the original Life is Strange, for example, had a subplot having to do with abortion and suicide and things like that. That can be really heavy topics, but they're handled in a very gentle way through story, and people can really relate to these games through these characters. So getting back to the Webby Award, getting a public service and activism award for that was actually really exciting to get acknowledged for that. We also won 2 awards at the Games for Change awards. We're also not nominated for a BAFTA. If you don't know what BAFTAs are, they're essentially the British equivalent of the Oscars. So that was super exciting. And we also were nominated for the VGA Award. So we had a lot of success with this game. And it's super exciting. All right, let me see. Let me click on next slide, see where we're going. Introduction time. All right, Corwin, it's all you.
Hi, I'm Corwin. I'm the assistant director at Deck 9. I'm also an associate producer at Deck 9, if there's any producers out there. So I started with Deck 9 about 3+ years ago. On our last project, they pulled me on when they decided Webb needed a friend. So I went onto the project and just assisted him with everything motion capture and shoot related. Cool fact is that I actually came from the Colorado Film School. I earned a reputation as a strong assistant director there, and then they recommended me they found me there. Deck 9 found me at the school, and I applied and had a big long interview with Webb and landed the job. Originally, I actually got a bachelor's degree at UNC. Figured I'd note that just because I saw some people that came from UNC. So I'm an alum. Go team. Go Bears. And yeah, that's basically me.
Cool, I think I'm up next. So I'm one of the performance directors at Deck 9. I also am a casting director. I'm a proud member of the Casting Society of America. And I own my own casting company, Sylvia Gregory Casting. And we cast films and commercials and theater. I have been the casting director for the Colorado Shakespeare Festival for the last 7 seasons. And by default, I guess it'll be 8 since we've shifted our entire season this year to next season, sadly. Let's see, I have a degree in classical theater from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and I have a master's degree in classical acting from the Alabama Shakespeare Festival. And I got this job because I was casting an unnamed project for this company, and the vice president, Jeff Litchford, wrote me and said, hey, we're looking for this position. Do you know anyone who might be appropriate for it? Listed the duties, and I was like, I think I could maybe do that. Can I try? So they auditioned me for this job, and after many interviews and several different sessions of things, they hired me. That's it.
Cool. And that leaves to me. My name is Webb Pickersgill, and I'm also a performance director at Deck 9 Games. My background is all over the place, but it's super fun. Wanted to be a heavy metal musician, so I play electric bass. Went to school for music education, so that was fun. Did that for a while. Graduated college and then went into IT. So I did systems design and programming for about 10 years, and that was super fun, very technological. I'm more of a technology geek at heart. And then I decided to open my own business in film and video production. So I ran a video production company where I serviced local clients. This was in Phoenix, Arizona at the time. Making commercials and short projects, working on television shows, local television shows. And then eventually I went into just doing freelance as a freelance DP, freelance director, freelance editor in independent film. And yeah, so kind of spread the spectrum there of things that I've done. And I think they all come together really uniquely well in this position because motion capture is a really strong blend. As a director, it's a very strong blend of the creative, which you need to have, but also the technical, and understanding what you're asking the actor to do will actually ultimately work in the game. It could be the most creative thing in the world and you can capture it, but if it's not usable in the game, then it's all for naught. So that is me. All right, so let me see, let's move on. Oh, okay, now is the time to roll the clip. So here's what I'm gonna do. Whoop, no, back up. Come on, computer. I'm going to grab this URL real quick. And I'm gonna paste this into, can I paste it in there? Or I'm gonna answer, how do I do this? Answered.
Sorry, Webb, you trying to
just want to paste the
everybody?
URL. Yeah, how do I do that?
If you paste it to me in the chat function, then I think I can send it out to all the attendees.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So let me try that. Chat, and then I'm going to paste that to you. And then, sweet, if you get that sent out to everybody. Yeah. And while she's getting that sent out to everybody, what I want you to do, this is a trailer for The Life is Strange Before the Storm. And then just take about 2 minutes. It's a little less than 2 minutes long. Just take a watch of that, and we'll come back in about 2 minutes. And I just want you to have the context of kind of what we've made in the past.
Whatever happens, Rachel, I'm here. How do you know which way is up when your whole life has been turned upside down? Oh, good. You're here. Come on, hurry up! Go back. So, are you gonna invite me in? Sometimes, when you meet someone who's going to change your life, you just know it, I guess. Let's leave. For real.
Talk to me, Chloe.
I know I fucked up. You don't scare me.
Who are you?
Shit. I've got to help Rachel. Rachel, run! Whatever it takes.
Chloe, go!
Shit! You're the only one in the world I can trust. Whatever happens, Rachel, I'm here.
Great. So at this point, you just have an idea of the game that we made and maybe some of the animations and what it looks like coming out the other end. And now when we look at the process, maybe you have some questions, it might help with questions. So let's move on.
And I just want to
Yes.
point out that every single character you saw in that clip was motion captured by somebody, right?
Correct.
So that's
Yes.
a lot of motion capture in one scene.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we motion captured the whole thing in the Colorado studio here. And you're right, every motion in there was captured by a human in a suit. So, all right. So this brings us to, what is motion capture? I mean, it's kind of this big category. It starts with, usually when you say what is motion capture, it usually means the body movements. That's traditionally what it's meant. It's a person, it's a gymnast, it's a kung fu fighter, it's martial arts, whatever it is, it's just body motion. And that's captured, as you can see by the picture here, by somebody in a suit that has the markers. We call them markers. Some people just call them dots, but if you want to be super professional, you call them markers. And putting markers on the suit. Now, that's what we normally see. But it also can include prop movements because props can also have markers on them. So you could have a sword that has a couple of markers on it, or it could be, I don't know, a mug of beer and that has some markers on it. And those props are also captured as part of motion capture. Then as technology evolved, it started to expand into the face because face is also motion technically. And as you can see in the picture here, we have the capability with the helmets and it's kind of hard to see, but there's actually a small little camera. Let me see, do I have my little drawing thing here? I don't know if I can draw or not, I guess we'll find out. Nope, I can't draw. But basically, there's a little camera on the end of each of these helmets, and that captures the face. And of course, I just revealed the last bullet point here, which is voice. Technically not part of motion capture, but when you go that extra step and you add the microphone, and you are able to see my cursor moving, yes, no, I'm not sure. Okay, cool, great. As you can see, we do have microphones on our helmets as well. So when you add the voice, it's no longer motion capture technically, but it becomes what we call full performance capture. It's a way of capturing head to toe an entire actor's performance, their nuances, their facial expressions, and their voice all in one. And what's great about that is that it helps us really keep the integrity of the intent of an initial performance. And let me just qualify that with the way that video games have traditionally been made, just to kind of make that distinction. In the past, I would say maybe 10 years ago, let's go there. In order to get a narrative like cinematic, what you would do is you'd have an actor go into a voiceover booth in LA usually, and they would record all of the VO, similar to how you would in a cartoon, right? They go and they record all the VO. And then they would either hand animate all the body motions and all the facial expressions, or they would maybe have somebody do the body and motion capture, and then they would hand animate the face. But it was always disjointed. It was always, you do one thing, which is the voice, and then you did the other thing, and you marry them together. And that's actually the way that we did our first game. We did voiceover in LA. We did body motion capture here in the studio, and then we did a partially automated but mostly hand animated face for all of the animations that you saw. We have since moved into full performance capture. So for our unannounced title that we're working on right now, we are doing full performance capture, which really, it raises the bar on quality. And and the integrity of the performance itself. So that, in a not so small nutshell, is motion capture and what we'll be talking about today, all those pieces there. All right. What is motion capture? Well, we start out with a bunch of people in a room with the suits on, with the markers on, and they do some sort of physical movement. At that point, what actually gets captured from a systems and technological standpoint is just a cloud of dots. So imagine if you're looking at a TV screen and you just see like an array of stars that are all just moving around, and you can kind of see movement, but you're not quite sure what's happening. Well, that's all that's being captured, or just the markers, the reflective markers. There's infrared sensors that pick up those reflections. Well, the software, and to answer somebody's comment from before, yes, we use Vicon, we use Shogun, and we used to use Blade, but now we use Shogun. And that software, what it does is it looks at that point cloud and it says, okay, well, if this dot is here and this dot is here, and I see those dots over there, well, then those must be the shoulders. So let's draw a bone between those two pieces. And if that means that those dots up there must be his head. So it basically reverse engineers a skeleton over top of those markers in order to figure out where that person is. So this is where, not occluding markers. Occluding a marker would be, you see a marker, you put your hand over it, now nobody can see where that marker is. The computer can't see it. And when that happens, and if you cover up too many markers, it can't reconstruct the skeleton. And then like arms start going backwards and heads start falling off. It's really obnoxious and fun. So to do it right, obviously you see all the markers, it recreates the skeleton, and we can usually see that skeleton in real time as the actor's moving around. I don't have any video of that today, so the screenshot is the best I can give you. But yeah, imagine these little guys dancing around on the screen. They're super fun. And eventually, that goes through a pipeline, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but that skeleton gets transformed. It gets put into basically a digital puppet or a character, and that is the skin, as we might say, and that then animates that skin, kind of like a puppet would. And that's what we see in the final game, is a character model that is animated by an underlying skeleton that was driven by a bunch of dots that were controlled by an actor. I know it's kind of really crazy when you think about all those steps, but that's kind of what's going on behind the scenes. So that is how we get from dots to, I said dots. We go from dots to final performance in the game.
We do have a question right now. I don't know if you're about to get to this, or maybe we can, I'll just say it out loud, and if we're about to get to it, then we can push it off. But this is an interesting one. What is the process for the animation of video games when it comes to characters that look like the actor who's voicing them? Kind of like Willem Dafoe and Ellen Page in the game Beyond Two Souls. That's cool.
So there is definitely a benefit to having the actor actually be modeled, or have the model be modeled after the actor. And the benefit is when you're doing facial expressions, especially when you're doing the facial capture, when you're doing those facial expressions, what you see is what you should be getting in the game. There's no doubt. It's like, well, that's the way she looks when she's angry. We should make it look like that. When you have characters that are modeled independent of your actor, we have to go through a transformation process. We have to go through a process where we map, okay, we want the actor to show me your angry face. Great. And then we need to make an angry face on the character and say, okay, yeah, that's the best angry face. And then we tell the computer, every time you see this face, make this expression on the character. So there's a mapping process. And what can happen is there can be a translation error. So during the acting process, when you're in between those hard poses, the computer has to interpolate. Okay, well, it's not quite angry, and it's not quite sad, and it's not quite this. Okay, well, let me blend those together and give you this shape. Well, that doesn't always work. It doesn't always look like anything that we can read as humans. So that's why the more it is one-to-one with the actor, we call that one-to-one, where the face looks exactly like the character. The more it is one-to-one, the more we know it's going to be accurate. And so that's where that value comes from.
Cool.
So
Thanks.
hopefully that answers that question.
I'd like to
All right.
come in here too, Webb.
Of course.
Also, it's worth noting that we have an entire dedicated character team that closely works with animation, and they're actually going to be making changes to the model, the face, throughout the entire project. because, you know, as we're getting more facial expressions and everything, sometimes it's going to come out looking a little off, just very weird poses. So they're constantly updating those models to make it work and get the best performance possible.
Yeah, and even to add on to that, you know, the facial expressions that a character makes in a digital form is really complex. How they actually get that to look good, I have no idea, because the character modeling team are wizards. So yeah, they look at real people's faces all day, and then they look at their models and they figure out ways to make it look that way, and good for them. So moving on to our motion capture room. Obviously, you can look at my background here. I'm not actually in the motion capture room right now. You know, thanks to Zoom for this cool background thing. But this is basically our motion capture room. We've done some upgrades since then, but this is essentially what our room looks like. The thing to notice, and it's kind of hard to see in this wide angle lens here, but these tiny little black dots around the edge of the top of this trusses here, each one of these is a motion capture camera. They're Vicon cameras in our case. Vicon is the leader in optical motion capture. And we have 16 cameras that we've put around the outside of the room. We also put some a little bit lower, as you can see down here. And what this does is it creates an array, a visual array of the room. So it can see what's going on in the middle from every conceivable angle. And every marker, basically, if you know anything about triangulation, the idea is that for any marker, as long as you have 3 cameras, any 3 cameras can see that marker, it can figure out where it is in 3D space. It's the basics of triangulation. So the more cameras you have, the more chance there is that you'll be able to figure out where that thing is in space. And in fact, the more cameras you have, the more certain you are that where you think it is really where it is. So you've seen professional mocap stages that have like hundreds of cameras. They really want to make sure that they're, you know, for Hollywood, make sure they're getting the best. 16 works really well for us. We're always looking to improve that, of course. We also have a grid on the floor. Again, it may not be it's pretty hard to see. We have these little 2x2 panels that lay out in a grid basically on the floor. And it's also really hard to see, but we actually have them all labeled, 0 through whatever and A through whatever, every 2 feet. And what that does is it creates a grid on the floor that represents a physical amount of space. And what we can do is we can actually recreate that grid in our 3D space. So in our virtual world, we then drop down this thing that looks like a grid in the middle of the space. And we can then move it around and figure out, okay, where do we want to shoot this? Okay, well, if the person is going to be in their home and they're going to be over by the sink, then okay, let's move the grid so that's in the kitchen and it fits in the kitchen where we're going to be walking. And then once we know where that is, we can then see, okay, well, the sink is actually at A5 and the refrigerator is at B6. I'm making up numbers. That probably doesn't make any sense. But basically from that grid, we can determine where those objects are in the space. And then that allows us to set up the physical mocap room for those interacts, right? If there's a refrigerator door that needs to be open, we need to set up a mechanical thing that lets us know where that's going to be. That's our grid system. And we'll see a little bit more of that. And I'm sure Corwin will talk about that quite a bit more when we get down to our workflow. And also you can see our acoustic treatment on the walls. It's not soundproof, but we do have to treat the walls for audio. So normally if you're in a room, if you know any audio guys, you know, they walk into a room and they go like this, and then they look around inquisitively and they clap. It's an inside joke with audio people. But what they're doing is they're listening to see how that sound reflects off the walls. And when it comes back to them, what that sounds like. Are there early reflections, late reflections? Is it, not that it's soundproof, but how does the sound work in the room? Well, these sound treatments help reduce the early reflections and late reflections. So when you scream, we only capture the scream and not the echo of that scream coming back. And you can also see in our mocap room, we have some workstations for each of the roles, which we'll cover in a little bit. And right now they're all over here on this one side of the room. We ended up expanding and putting workstations on the other side of the room later. This is an older photo, but that's the idea, is that everybody has a workstation to do their work from. And that is that. Any questions there before we move on to getting to our workflow?
Doesn't look like it
well,
yet.
cool. And it looks like while Corwin's going to be talking, I'm going to go look back through apparently a few questions. My sister's here. Yay, cool. All right, nice. All right, Corwin.
You're
Take it
controlling the slides.
I know, I'm getting there. There you go.
It's a good way to start by reminding Webb to do something, because that's literally my job 24/7. So here we go into workflow. So there's a lot of different departments in mocap, I'll say that. So we're gonna talk about typically what follows our creative mocap pipeline. So if you have any specific questions about departments that we don't ask about, we can always cover that later. So we, as always with any production, we start with the script. So we pride ourselves in telling narrative adventure games. Like Webb said, choose your own adventure, which I'm very familiar with myself. I'm part of that generation. We create a story, kind of like an independent film, but we make it in a video game style. So we're going to be having gameplay and choices, different arcs you can take. That's the type of game we like to make. So our script varies a little bit from what you're used to with normal production, normal film or television or theater. We have a very similar screenplay format when it comes to narrative action, dialogue, characters, all that. But then we have a couple other elements that we have to factor in. One of them I'll actually kind of skip over is branching. Because in a story where you can make choices, you're going to be splitting the narrative a little bit. So we have to write our script to accommodate that. So we have the two different choices and the two different directions you can take. But the way to make a story like this is you always have to have whatever choice you make, it always kind of has to come back to what we call critical path. It has to come back to a singular path so we can continue telling the same story. Otherwise, we'd have 1,000 different timelines and 1,000 different stories, and the game would be 10 times bigger than it actually is. The way we accommodate that is when we write our scripts, we actually write in kind of code, a foundation for the entire game. This code applies to two different things. One is gameplay. Gameplay is the moment when you kind of take over the protagonist and you can, we call it free roam, where you can actually wander around the environment and find little quests or go talk to different people. And the other one that we factor in with code is our logic. And what logic means is as you're making your choices throughout the game, it's kind of creating conditions that we have to honor as you get further into the game. So if you run into another character that you decided to be mean to or nice to, that might have a different way it could play out when you talk to them again. So we're always trying to factor that in when we're writing the script. Next up is identifying the content. So this is when we have locked our script. We get a friendly heads up from our awesome narrative team that Webb and I can do our thing, and Sylvia. We basically go in and line the script. And what that basically means at first is we are going in and just breaking down the script into different sections. These sections actually have a huge impact because since we're kind of at the start of this pipeline, how we break out the script into the different sections that we want to produce, that then translates for the entire team. So everything we break down, and we call them moments. We break down each script into little moments so we can produce those moments like kind of as centralized pieces. It's helped us a lot with how we produce such a huge like script or game compared to a narrative film where you're just trying to wrap up the scene. Next up would be scheduling. So this is a huge feat and definitely a difficult feat most of the time. We compared to film where you might bring in actors for a set like congested period of time and just wrap them out, just get all of their content. We as a video game company have to be a lot more flexible. We have our production spanning across typically like anywhere from 1 to even other studios is like 6 years. So we have to be a lot more flexible in terms of scheduling. We basically do our motion capture shoots in spurts. So we're taking a small piece of content or even a scene and capturing that content, and then we kind of go away and run with it, and then we get the next piece of content ready before we actually shoot again. So this has a lot of challenges to it because we have to juggle obviously all the characters in the game. Our motion capture, one thing that's important to note is we can actually only do up to 4 people at a time with full performance capture. And even then that's pushing it a little bit. So sometimes if we have a scene with a large amount of people, we really have to break out how we're going to capture all those little pieces of content, and which can be really challenging when, you know, a bunch of people have to interact with each other.
This is worth bringing up now, that what's unique about this compared to say film or theater is our actors, for the most part, don't have to be in the same room at the same time in order to get a scene done. We've had situations due to actor availability, which can be crazy, like you were saying, Corwin, where we have an actor that's available only today. And then we have an actor who's only available tomorrow, and then that's it for like a month. And due to our deadlines, we have to make it happen. So yeah, we can capture one, we can capture the other, and in the final game, they are in a 2-shot together over the shoulders, and you would never know that they were captured separately. So it is entirely possible just by the way of motion capture.
And this is
I had kind of a question. I don't know if this is a good time or not, so you can put it off. But in terms of, you had mentioned free roam earlier, and I was curious about that and whether or not you use actors for those moments, because you know those movements are so redundant. You're running, you're shooting, you're doing whatever. And if so, do you schedule those actors to do that early on so that you already have those kind of in the bank and you can be putting those in as you go? It's my 2-part question. Go for it.
Smart. It sounds like you already done this then. Because yeah, you answered it yourself basically.
I've been playing a lot of Zelda lately.
That's awesome. Yeah, we do capture walk cycles, right? So we schedule early with an actor, usually the beginning, like you mentioned, where they just walk across the floor several times. And then we pick a segment of that looks nice and we clean it up and then we loop it. And then that's the animation that you see over and over again as they walk. Same thing when they're just standing there, right? We capture them just standing there. And as simple as that sounds, having something that is interesting but not distracting it's a hard balance to find and takes a lot of tuning. And also we capture we just call them gestures. So a character standing there but you haven't walked for a few minutes, so you know they kind of like scratch their chin or something to keep them alive. So we capture a library of those as well.
Okay. You see characters like doing this like breathing motion a lot, I feel like, too. Do actors have to do that?
Well, it depends on if you in some games, right, it becomes almost comedy, right? Where you've seen the idols in games where they're like that little hop back and forth, which is kind of funny for certain games. But anyway, we try to make it look, for our game specifically, realistic and whatever. So it shouldn't be, unless they're out of breath, then it shouldn't be something really big like that.
Okay.
And chiming in here too, you are right to a degree, is that with a video game, because we are seeing digital assets, obviously if there's a character that's in like an idle position and they're way too still, like people are going to think the game is broken. It's like, oh, look, the character froze. So we do have to have some kind of body motion. We don't go like Final Fantasy style of the combat that Webb was talking back and forth. We try and find that blend of like, okay, it's natural, it feels alive, but it also doesn't feel like it's necessarily a video game. It's a live person that's just behaving in that way.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry to derail you. Thank you so much for that.
Not at all. These are great questions. So, yep. And then we prepare our grids and shot lists. So basically the shot lists that we're doing, we're identifying exactly how we want to capture the content. This kind of goes into the idea of like, if we have multiple actors, we really line out our shots and be like, okay, who do we want to pair with who? What is this blocking? And then as you can kind of tell from our mocap scene is that if we have big locations, we're kind of restricted on the environment. We can't just like have them walk from A to B because A to B might be, 40 feet away. So another thing we have to do when we split out our shot list and script is actually factor in the blocking with our grid. Like how much space can our actor actually move around? It not just stitching together different characters together for a performance. Sometimes we have to do the same character across like complicated blocking like that, where, okay, they're gonna move from A to B, but we actually have to split this up 3 different ways of them just walking across this terrain because it's so long. Webb kind of commented already a little bit that the way we do that is with our grids. We have, instead of like location scouting for our, the locations that we're going to film on, our environment team makes all the environments, and then our equivalent to this is we go in and find the location, figure out what our blocking is when we're generating our shot list, so we can see how we have to actually break this up. Because the one thing that we love to do with this is that's been super helpful with the grids. By having a digital grid inside the environment, we can map it 1-to-1. So that way, when our character interacts with the table we build for them, we know it's accurate. They're not going to be going through the table. They can move around it. And it just benefits the actors and the directors just overall, because it's just so much more of a natural performance. Compared to asking an actor to be like, hey, there's a table there, so don't walk through this dead air. We like to build those environments for them. So that's kind of a part of our process when we're building out our shot list. The next step would be our VO. So as you can imagine, with a video game, especially one with so many branches and gameplay and all of this, we have thousands of lines we have to manage for in the game. Every single line requires a certain amount of work. Not only do we have to record the line and kind of make sure it's accurate, but there's post work that has to be done for every single line. We have to manage all the subtitles at the end. Localization is actually always a factor. That's basically the translation of subtitles. So if we wanted to, we can actually market our game and sell our game in other countries where English isn't the native language. And then the final thing that's a huge task is actually changes, because changes happen all the time in a script. And every little tiny line change we have, even if you change a hey to a sup, like we have to track that. So VO management is like a whole thing. I'll be able to talk about that a little later. And we prep all of that from the script. Finally, after we kind of do all that prep work, we actually get to mocap. These next pieces, we're going to go in more depth a bit later, so I'll just kind of glance over them. So we capture the performance in mocap. Once we finish a shoot and we process that, we convert it into our digital performances. Once we convert the digital performance and have those animations, we then pass it to our cinematics team to edit and produce the actual content. Animation will go in and actually polish those animations. We'll actually do VFX next, where we're gonna, any kind of VFX that need to happen, whether it's like special powers or nature, to even simple like water running or glass shattering, we have to produce all that. Compared to like a normal film where if someone just threw a bottle, I mean, you got it. These are just shattered. It's the actual prop. We have to make all of that. And then the final step, as with any production, is audio. Audio will go in and they'll do not just post work on VO, but they'll also be producing music and sound effects for the entire game. And then the final step is, we can never forget these rock stars, are programming. Our programmers are a kick-ass team, and they make sure that everything we've produced just fits together and works well, and actually so people can play the game. So they're that team that at the end just make sure everything works perfectly.
And you have to consider that in our industry, our actual final product is technically software. So at the end of the day, programmers are what make it all work. It's, entertaining software, but nonetheless, it is software at the end of the day.
Cool. Moving into roles and responsibilities, we talked a lot about how our process is, and we'll get into a little bit more details later, but we want to kind of do a shout out to who actually makes this work. We start with our go-to, one of what I like to call the mocap trio, just because when we started, it actually used to be just Webb, myself, and this lovely person. This is our body and motion capture tech, Caitlin Takens.
A wonderful picture of the back of her head. Sorry about that, but yeah.
She oversees all things body capture. So all the skeletons and all the actual behaviors people are doing, basically everything included with motion capture that isn't face. She is the one overseeing that. She does a couple other things because she's a rock star for us. She manages all our props and builds some props. You can see kind of in this image, we have a door in the background there behind the actor. And then you can see a little rectangle on our monitor. We actually made that prop and tracked it so we can track the props and push that data up to our animators. Anything that's bigger than a cell phone, essentially, we try and track because it just makes our animators' lives so much easier. Because they're basically animating anything that moves. That's kind of why the name is motion capture, is that we want to capture all motion. She also helps build all our sets during our prep work. So while we're figuring out grids and blocking, she's the one that oversees creating all our actual sets to use in the room. So that would be getting the door set, creating tables, chairs, to even more complicated rigs. I think our last project, the most complicated rig we ever built was a truck, and that was fun. There's half a lie and half the truth there. It was fun, but also it is incredibly difficult to do complex rigs like that.
Yeah, there's a question from earlier, and I clicked on the answer live button, and somehow it deleted the question. So sorry about that. Whoever asked the question, I can't tell you by name, but one of the questions was, do we create props? It was something like about creating props out of the real world. Oh, you have it.
Yeah, I can read it right now if you want. You said you place objects and architecture on the grid. Do you ever use actual objects to represent those things, like acting blocks or something else?
Yeah, we do. Whenever possible, as a director, I want my actors to have the real thing to interact with, right? There's no substitution in looking at a photograph and having that photograph mean something and like actually using that to help with your process versus, hey, here's a piece of PVC pipe with some markers on it. Can you just like act, just pretend? It doesn't quite turn out as well. So whatever possible, we try to always use actual objects to interact with. In this case, a door, like a physical door, instead of making something out of pipes or whatever.
And to add on to this too, just because the way motion capture works, I mean, it's all about a camera basically seeing these markers. So we rarely will actually have the actual prop itself. Like you can kind of see in this door, it has a giant hole in it. Anytime we need props or environment, we're always trying to make just the base skeleton so we can make sure we're not blocking the cameras. Because what ends up causing a lot of problems is if we have, say if Webb, I'm gonna call him out here, if he's actually in the shot, in the space like that, he could be blocking markers. And like if he's blocking markers, that means our software doesn't know exactly what it's looking at. If it blocks one marker, it might actually mistake another marker for that. So that's why joints and stuff might come out all weird. So we factor that in when we build props and sets. We always try and use like basic pipes or structures so we're not blocking markers. And our motion capture tech, if she were here, would probably have a whole list of things like that we could not do in mocap. And that goes from objects to have to even like sitting positions. When we say a character has to sit or hug, like, oh God, I feel her stare on the side of my head all the time.
So one other thing to mention, like say about the door specifically, is we create these props in order to help prevent occlusion of the markers. But that can actually create challenges accidentally. Like in this door situation, how many times have I had an actor where they're about to answer the door, but they start acting through the hole in the door before the door's open? Because well, they can see each other, so why wouldn't you do that? But you have to remind them, by the way, this is actually a solid door. You can't see them until, oh yeah, you're right, I'm so sorry. So same thing with tables. Like we build tables, but we don't always fill in the whole surface. So they can accidentally put their elbow down through the table. We have to remind them, no, this whole thing is solid. So if you're gonna put your elbow, So yay, the problems of a motion capture tech. And that is what Caitlin does, is yell at us when we get it wrong, so.
We know her yells all too well. So next up, speaking through, we have the face motion capture tech. Very similar to kind of Caitlin, except he's responsible for tracking all the face markers and all that motion capture. He's doing the one that's setting up the helmets and making sure it's all aligned perfectly so we get the proper data passed through. And he's just making sure that as we're actually mocapping, I almost said filming, he is making sure that all the data is clean. There's no head bumps, nothing gets like adjusted, making sure markers are always there. He's the one responsible for all of that. He also is a huge part of the team in helping Caitlin with all the grid work and building props and all that. He's always an extra hand that's happy to help. Next up is our audio director, Chuck. As you can tell from the appropriate image of him just kind of lingering in the back with headphones on, you could only guess that he's an audio person. So Chuck is our actual audio director on the entire project. So while he records all the VO in the game with us, he's making sure it's all like clear and enunciated correctly, making sure that when it gets to the final game, like fans and the gamers will perfectly understand what's being said, because there is like that weird disconnect a little bit with watching, say, a live performance and me talk and what I'm saying. If I slur my words or something, or have a little impediment, it's probably going to be communicated because you can kind of see my face. Video games, we have to be a little bit more careful about that because, all right, see you, bud. Sorry, my roommate was yelling at me. I totally got derailed there. When you're in a video game, sometimes the VO, if it's not so clear, because we don't have that visual, it might not be as clear what someone said. So we always want to make sure it's accurate. It's worth noting too, as audio director, not only is he recording VO, but outside the mocap room, he's also managing the rest of our audio department, including sound effects and music. He's actually quite a rock star, believe it or not, but that'll be a story for another day. Oh, this next one's fun. So I'm the assistant director. Corwin someone Cantin. Alexis Bloom is also assistant director on the project. We end up having two because when you have a project get so big, there's so many pieces to manage and so much content to manage. We need more than just one person to kind of hold the fort down. So the job, as I kind of described earlier, is basically I coordinate all the shoots. I'm making sure all the little pieces are in place before we actually get to motion capture. And then we're the ones that actually run the shoot. So we make sure all the little pieces are there while we're actually producing the content. But I'm also kind of the liaison for all the other departments in the office. So whether it's before set or during set, I am kind of that bridge to make sure that anything that happens in the room, one is we're respecting all the work from all the other departments in the office, but also if anything changes in the room, I'm communicating that to them. Because the thing about video games that I love in this project compared to film is that it is such a huge collaboration. Like you have so many people involved in doing awesome work and making this game better. And like every single voice like needs to be heard. So it's an ongoing communication among everybody. There's not like one person basically saying, hey, do this, and then everyone just does it. It is very much an active conversation all through the project, and that's what I love about it. The someone reference goes back to when Webb, Caitlin, and I, oh God, you left it in there. When Webb, Caitlin, and I were the only people doing motion capture, people, they'd always say, we need someone to hold this Apple box for this shot. Well, Webb had to direct and Caitlin was overseeing body, so that really only left one person to be someone to help with the shot. So my nickname in the office quickly became someone. And you can kind of see an example of that with that other picture. Yeah, all right, you can move on now. So we have our day players next. Our day players are our script supervisor and our camera operators. Script supervisor is a very different, well, not very different, but a little different than film. Our body capture tech, Caitlin, is actually managing body continuity. And because we have our own environments, it's all controlled. We don't have like background action we ever have to worry about when it comes to watching continuity. So our script supervisor is actually just watching VO, making sure all the lines are accurate, flagging any changes so we can green light them or go back and go for another take. They're overseeing all of that during our production shoots. Our camera operators are the ones doing the reference footage. The reference footage actually have a couple different uses. One is it's footage for our animators. It just helps them be able to look at some kind of footage to see the natural performance, to understand if an animation comes through, like how to animate that, what it's supposed to be. That footage is also used for our directors. So we can creatively watch the performances, see the whole thing from body to face, and make our decisions off of that. Ultimately, this footage is also used to talk with our publisher and review with our publisher. I'm scrolling through my notes here too. Some other roles to keep moving. We actually have our writing staff on set. If we are producing a scene, we'll have the scene writer attend set and watch the performance. And then they're kind of that creative bounce board with Webb. Going back to the idea of collaboration, is Webb and our writer will always talk about performances, making sure it fits the consistency of what the vision was behind the script, but also just making sure that for this huge project that all the performance and everything we get matches this ultimate story, this ultimate vision here. We have the creative game director, or the creative director or game director. They're basically the same. This person is essentially the showrunner on the entire video game project, if this were a TV show. They're the ones that have a hand in every single department, just reviewing with every department and everything in the game. And they just make sure that we are consistent across the board with the story we're producing and making. And that goes from the narrative side of the script to all the way to environment and our character team. Like, would our characters wear these outfits in this situation? So they're kind of that overseer for the whole thing. And our animation supervisor, I think, is the last one that we use. They're our basically our resource in mocap to help us work through any complicated blocking or rigs. They're the ones that help speak to our animation team. The one in particular is a guy named Manny Trujillo. He is a badass who's one of our kind of head animators, but also he has like over 10 years of experience with mocap. So he's always coming in when we have complicated rigs or challenges. He's always the one to come in and help us so we can talk through our problem and figure out how we're going to actually mocap. Yeah, and the key goal is collaboration. Because something I heard when I first started was at Deck 9, everyone leaves ego at the door, and that is very true. It is a collaborative effort. Every voice is heard. Our creative director, Zach, he always tells everyone on the team, the whole staff, that like if you have an idea, throw out your voice. Like, he wants everyone to be heard, and that's one of the things I love about this company and this job is they will not shut you down, whatever your role is. Like, even me as a logistics side, I know Webb and our writers are always actually listening to me if I have like a note or something I want to throw out during mocap, and I love that. All right, we'll let you guys take this away.
Okay, actors. We're going to talk about actors. So basically, we cast multiple actors locally as much as we possibly can. We will always do local auditions first, looking for roles. And after that, if we feel we haven't found the strongest options possible, then we will take it to Los Angeles. But the local community is very important to us, and so that is where we always start to look. To be an actor for mocap, you have to have a lot of different skills and strengths, and you have to be an excellent storyteller. And we will talk a little bit later about specifically the skills and strengths that we look for. I did see a question about, do you look for a specific look? Not usually. Sometimes we might need someone to be a certain height or weight. If a character is diverse, we'll try and match that diversity, but usually no, it's more about your performance ability than it is about how you look for casting. I want to talk a little bit about performance directors. Webb and I are both performance directors. We have overlapping duties, but we also have separate responsibilities. And so just basic breakdown of my responsibilities in this whole wonderful world are, the first thing is the script prep, to understand the overall scene content, what's happening with the overall plot, as well as the individual character arcs within each scene. And sometimes, as you saw in that clip we watched earlier, there'll be many, many, many characters in one scene, and every one of them is going through something different. So part of your job is understanding, and with all of the branches that Corwin was talking about earlier, keeping track of how this character is feeling in this third branch versus how this character is feeling in the first branch. So having a very clear knowledge of what's going on is vitally important. The main part of what I do, and I feel like what I was mainly hired to do, is to get the best performances out of the actors as possible. This means guiding the actors in the room towards their deepest performances, their most emotional truth. I help them find ways to really dig deep if we have some really emotional stuff, which we often do. And that's getting to know each actor and how each actor works differently. And some will be like, you know, oh yeah, I saw this great movie, and then they'll be back to talking again. And some actors just need some time to focus and concentrate. Sometimes they need to be talked through a progression of emotions. So it just, that varies. And that's a main part of what I do. Also, looking for playing opposites and how that can be interesting, finding humor, sometimes humor, even if it's just a word or two, finding that little bit of spark can really help. Creating chemistry is also challenging because, as Webb was talking about earlier, often they're not in the room together. And so it's, how do you create chemistry with someone who isn't there? So we work on keeping that consistency as well. And again, the most important thing is telling the story, clearly and emotionally telling the story. And then the last bit of what I'm doing is, after the animators have done their pass, I review the final animations and I compare those final animations to the recorded, what the actors' recorded performances are. And I want to be sure that those nuanced performances are honored in the animation. And most often they have been, but I just want to be sure if an actor did something really interesting or really specific, that I can say to the animators, oh, hey, you know, this person did this, can we add that in? So that's the final portion of what I do as a performance director. I think now, Webb, it's back to you for a little while.
Okay, cool. I guess at this point, I know we're pretty much just over the 1 hour mark. I'll check in with you, Kelly, to see how you want to proceed. We're probably maybe overly ambitious with what we wanted to present, and I'm happy to keep going, but I also want to be honor the people's time that are on here and how you want to run this.
Yeah, no, we have 90 minutes set aside for this, so we've got another 25 or so. I'm seeing that you guys are answering some of the questions as you go along, whether you're typing that or doing it out loud. So please feel free to keep doing your slides, and then if we can reserve maybe 15 or 10 minutes at the end for some final questions, that'd be great.
Of course. Okay,
yeah.
Great. All right, so then moving into different kinds of capture. So there are different ways that we can use our motion capture technology to capture performances, which is maybe a little different than the way it is in film, or definitely in theater. There is no capturing in theater. So for motion capture, like we talked about earlier, full performance capture is, you know, the full thing. And that's, I say, pretty obvious, but that's, you know, that's the whole enchilada. But every now and then, we only need to capture VO. There are circumstances where the character is just thinking in their head, for example, and we don't need to put on the suit and the helmet and align it and take the half an hour or so to do that. They can just say the line, old school VO style. So for those circumstances, we have a VO booth. We have VO recordings. We can just bring the actor in, rock out a bunch of lines of VO. But we also have different kinds of technology for certain kinds of situations. We have FVO, which is, well, if you know what VO is, FVO is just face voiceover. And these are circumstances where you'll be in a free room or in gameplay, right? You're on the stick and you're walking around in the game and you see the person standing on the side of the road and you walk up to them and you talk to them. Well, instead of going into a cinematic, which would be full performance, you would just maybe hear them say a couple lines of dialogue like, yeah, I've got the best wares here in the city, right? If this is like some kind of fantasy thing where you're like looking for armor. In those situations, you don't need a full cinematic. You only need to be able to see that their lips are moving and you hear the line of VO in the game space. So these moments we would capture as FVO. We're only capturing the face and the VO at the same time. And that's that. There's also the circumstance where, and again, this is maybe more of a rare situation, but we do have circumstances where we have a line of VO and it was captured, but now we realize, oh, we want this to be represented in the game as moving face, as animated face. We could hand animate it, but often it's faster to just put on a helmet and you play back. This is basically like ADR, but in reverse, for those of you who are familiar with ADR. Instead of watching a physical performance and re-performing the audio, it's listening to the audio and re-performing the physical performance. So in that case, they would listen to the line, they would get the timing down, and then they would re-record the face. And we line those up in post and reinsert them back into our game.
What does ADR stand for?
It depends on who you ask. It's automatic dialogue replacement from film, or there's a bunch of different acronyms for it, but that's one of them. Yeah. So those are different kinds of types that we capture, and then just go through our pipeline. But let's get into, oh wow, there we go. Oh, yeah, I want to reveal it one at a time. There we go. Yes, PowerPoint, behave. So what are the key aspects of performance capture? A lot of people ask, especially actors, wanting to audition and come in, look, what does it take? Right? I think it may have even been one of the questions that popped up on our Q&A. It's a multifaceted system of disciplines that you need to have in order to really and truly be successful in motion capture. The first, and these aren't necessarily in any order, although I have to put them in order for the presentation, is film experience. And what I mean by film experience is nuance. Things that you can see when you're on an 85mm lens and you're on the extreme close-up and it's a very emotional scene. And as humans, we can pick up on the smallest little twitch, the smallest little indication that gets us to go, oh my gosh, she is so pissed right now, right? But almost by any other circumstance, you can't tell, right? But that nuance that comes with the super close-up, we're looking for that, a person who can carry that level of nuance. We're also looking for grounded performances. There are different styles of performance, right? There's sitcom style. It's very big. It's out there. It's on the nose. It's in your face. We look for things that are very grounded. Think of like a really good independent film festival where you go and just watch these just like earth-shattering, awesome performances. They're just as real as can be. We look for that style of filmic performance. So it's grounded and ultimately it's believable. It just sells as, yeah, that person just is that person. They're not playing anything. They just are. There's also the aspect of having a theater background is extremely helpful, as we found. There's a discipline that comes with theater, and that comes with obviously like memorization. Like I still don't know how this happens, but like apparently actors memorize like 2 hours worth of content and like do it all together at one time. Anyway, that kind of blows my mind. So all you theater actors out there, that's my kudos, because I can't even remember one line, and Corwin's gonna laugh because it's true. I read a line, I go out to talk to my actor, and I forgot it before I even get to them. So theater requires discipline and memorization and preparation, right? Being able to break down a script, break down their character. Not saying that film doesn't have that, but just there's a discipline that comes with theater that is super, super handy. There's also a level of control that comes with theater. Body awareness, right? With film, it's like, okay, you're here, you're doing your thing, you're in a close-up, right? In theater, you're always aware of your audience. You're aware of anybody could be anywhere on any one night, and you always have to be aware of where your audience is and what you're playing to. And that body awareness on top of a performance is super, super important. And of course, repeatability, right? So often, one of the things with motion capture is we'll usually shoot, let's say, about a page at a time, right? So about a minute's worth of content. And we could go for a take. And let's say we get a minute's worth, and it was like awesome. These two actors are doing great. Everything's great. But there was one thing at the very end where I just didn't like the read on this line, or I didn't like the direction, or maybe the prop interaction was weird. So for us, we can't just pick up the last line. Just by the way that our workflow is, we usually need to capture that entire minute as one piece. And that whole piece goes into the game. Rarely do we chop it up into smaller pieces. So this is where repeatability is super handy. Saying, hey guys, I love the take, it's perfect. The only thing I want to change is when you pick up the line or you pick up the beer at the end, I want you to think about your dead girlfriend instead when you take the drink, because that moment is going to translate for whatever reason. I still need everything else to be exactly the same because I'm taking the whole take. So that repeatability, that ability to know where you came from as an actor in order to hit that whole take and only change that one thing at the end and have that first take look like the previous take, so important. So anyway, that is really important aspect. You need to have technical skills. This is kind of hard to qualify, but we have a lot of procedures in the motion capture room. Corwin alluded to a few of them earlier, where it's like, oh, I need to cross my arms. Well, when I cross my arms, I have to put my hands in a specific place so that I don't cover up markers. Okay, so I need to act, I need to be in the scene, I need to memorize my lines, and when I cross my arms, I need to remember to do this one mechanical thing and still make it look good and not like a robot trying to figure out how to place their arms. We also need accuracy. A lot of times when you're placing things in a space where we don't have the physical objects, you have to imagine the table's going to be here. And I know that I don't want your arm to go through it accidentally. So you have to walk up to it and you have to think of all these mechanical things while you're doing it and with a level of accuracy. And then speaking to clarity, this is more for audio. There is a level of clarity that Corwin alluded to earlier where every spoken line of dialogue has to be clear, because at the end of the day, it's a video game and not all things completely translate through a video game mechanism as far as visuals. So having the clarity of the line will always trump the meaning. Whenever there's a doubt of what's going on, the line needs to carry the weight of the emotion. And then not least, but last is emotion. All that stuff that I just mentioned, you need to do it with emotion, which is what actors actually do. You need to do and not show, right? It's a case of being and not showing. It's reacting. It's not just, hey, I've got my line of dialogue, I'm on camera, and this is great. And then as soon as you're off, you just go numb and dead and waiting for your next line, and then you come alive again. I often look for the actors that I pick always give me something that's interesting, no matter if they're on camera or not. They're always in the moment, reacting to what's going on, and it's all usable. Some of the best actors that I've worked with recently, I find cutting to when they're not talking more times than when other people are talking, just because it's so much more interesting. So that's gold. And of course, having a good range, coming in and being able to demonstrate, hey, I can go here, super sad, I can go super angry, and it's all believable, and having that huge range. So this is something that this whole grid of disciplines are things that we look for. I know it's a lot, but that's what we look for.
And I'm going to jump in, Kelly. I know we're getting tight. I just want to clarify do, don't show just a little bit in case someone isn't familiar with what that means. And I can simplify it. It comes down to, don't show me that you're brushing your teeth, just brush your teeth. That's it. That's the difference. So just file that away if you wonder what that is. I'm going to quickly whiz through the casting process because I know we want to have a little time for Q&A at the end. So we can see up to 100 people per role. And all of the stuff that Webb just talked about is how we narrow down who we end up bringing into callbacks. And depending on the role and what we're looking for, if we start with 100 people, we'll find that there are maybe 5 to 15 who can actually do all of those things for the project that we need. So we have an intensive initial audition process. You get pages from your script, you prepare them, you'll have a reader, or you'll be working with another actor. Usually for an initial audition, you get about 15 minutes in the room, which is a lot for an initial audition. Usually you get 3 to 5. Usually they're done not at Deck 9, but at my casting studio or even remotely. Sometimes they're self-taped. So that's just sort of a real fast version of the initial audition process. And then Webb's going to talk about the callbacks. Is he there, Webb?
That's the torch, Webb.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I was talking and I was on mute. Sorry about that. So the abbreviated version is we pick minimal callbacks, but we spend a lot of time with our callbacks. I usually arrange for an hour per callback, which is unheard of, but really getting to work with somebody and give you an idea what's going on. So we do take our time with callbacks. And I am going to skip over, we had more to talk about there, but I think I'm going to skip it and just say Often we do have final callbacks where once we kind of know who our final people are, we can bring them back together. We can actually start doing matchups, finding chemistry, and often we have publisher involvement late in the process where they'll sit down and actually watch and help like direct and see what they want to see from these characters as well. So it can be pretty intensive.
I do think it's
And
also very enjoyable, though. Actors have said multiple times they really enjoy this process.
yeah, and it is unusual, but it is a black hole. I know this is kind of funny to put this in here because people ask, they're like, well, I did this audition for Deck 9 and it's been a year, and then we give them a call. Hey, yeah, by the way, remember that position? Yeah, we want you, come on in. And they're like, wait, what? That was like a year ago. So it can feel like a black hole from the outside, but it is always ongoing. We just, for our current project, we just cast a role like a month ago, even though we've been working on it for 2 years. So you never know when we're going to do a casting call versus when we're actually going to implement that character, because the scripts are always in constant development, and you can never predict. We might think we need a character. That character might evolve through the course of time. They might get cut. They might actually get blended with another character to become a new character. We never know what's going to happen. But just know that, and Corwin, I'll speak for Corwin here, is that we will always communicate, right? We always try to tell you, hey, here's where we are in this process. We know it's been a long time, or we have definitely cut this character, or no, we're definitely still considering this. We might use it for another character. We always let you know what's going on, either directly or via your agent. And one thing from my perspective, I always remember good auditions. I don't know how many times there have been somebody who auditioned and I'm like, I like that person. That was awesome. And I have no idea if they're right for this role, but they are awesome. And we've had those people come back and have roles in other projects. So just because you didn't get the role, trust me, you might still get a role. All right, so here's what I want to do.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, because of the time, we still had many more slides, but it was more on the post-production side of things. I think what I want to do is open up the last, whatever this is, for questions. And maybe some of those questions have to do with stuff we haven't talked about yet, but let's do that now.
Cool.
Unless you guys have any objections.
No, I think that sounds great. Sylvia and Corwin, you guys on board? I'm seeing some thumbs up. Awesome. Very cool. Thank you guys so much for, my God, all of that information. I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to control myself and just ask the ones that have been asked so far. I just saw one. I don't know if you guys want to answer this out loud, Corwin. It looks like you just typed an answer, but just for the benefit of the group, have you used mocap systems that aren't infrared camera based? And if so, are there any that you've liked?
Ironically, I wrote an answer there and I was halfway of answering another one below it. Yeah, so we've only used the infrared with Deck 9 for now. I know we have a couple of mocap techs who are experienced with using other forms of capture, like magnetic capture. We can't really recommend using one brand over another just because we haven't used it in official capacity. But we do know there are options out there. We just haven't had to need to use them ourselves. Infrared has really worked well for our needs.
Cool. Thank you. That one's in the little answered column now. And then just underneath that on the other page was a question, how many minutes of content are produced for each type of game?
So that actually depends on the project. When we are actually concepting the narrative, the production team is working hand in hand with narrative to scope out exactly how much content we'd be producing and how much time the team actually needs. It's kind of like an ongoing process of talking with our publisher about how much content, how long they want their game to be, then how much cinematic content is going to be in the game versus gameplay. So it varies project to project. Webb, do you remember the number that was before the storm, what the full cinematic minute count was?
I can't remember, but it was obscene. The number, it's the equivalent of like 5 feature films, something like that. It was because of the number of branches, right? It's not just linear playtime. It's cinematics that you may never see because it's optional content. It's branches of the game that you're not going to see because you like the persons instead of disliking them. So there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't see it all in the first go.
So if I had to guess, I would say that on our 3rd episode, the longest episode we did on our last project, the playtime was about 3 to 3.5 hours, and cinematic content, I think we had like an hour to an hour and a half. So that the difference there is all gameplay, just wandering around, free roam, doing puzzles and all of that. That's kind of my best guess though right now.
That's an insane amount of content. And this next question actually kind of ties into that because you're producing so much content. Do you limit yourself to one project from start to finish, or are you working at multiple projects at the same time?
Thus far, we've just done the one project, but one thing we're always evaluating, and one thing that I love about Deck 9 is that we always look after the staff. So we are, our execs and everybody are actually actively working to get other projects lined up. So that way we can keep the entire team employed. Because the video game industry, as some of you may have heard, is a very, it's very risky. People lose jobs all the time. There's mass layoffs all the time. And Deck 9 seems to be the opposite of the stereotype. They're always working that every single person, AD, animator, even when work is light, we find some form of work for them. So we're definitely always open to multiple projects, that said.
Cool. That actually ties into a question that I just had, which is, I'm wondering how the ideas for video games originate, how they're generated, because, you know, you have a film and you might have a screenwriter who has an agent, and maybe that agent pitches the screenplay to a producer, and there's kind of that workflow. But do you guys generate these ideas internally, or are you taking in concepts from the outside? What does that look like?
I think currently we only accept them internally. We do internal pitch sessions. So we'll say, all right, everybody bring your best ideas. We're holding a lunch and we all get together and we just do a giant pitch fest, and people will sometimes give presentations, just sometimes, you know, right up on a board or something, but we gather them internally, and then the execs will look at, you know, various aspects of producibility and what the budget might be, and come up, you know, develop the ones that, the ideas that look like they might be viable. So right now, to answer your question in short, is we don't accept outside offers or whatever. So
yeah, no, that's really cool.
The one exception to that I will kind of say is sometimes publishers could come to us. They might have, and I mean, that's how we, I think, landed Before the Storm, right? Is we had a publisher with this IP that wanted to make another game, but with a different studio. And that's kind of how we landed that project. So there's always the case where a publisher owns an IP and comes to us and asks, hey, can you make this game? And then it's ongoing conversation of what's the story, who would own this, and like, what is it that we'd actually be producing?
I mean, that seems, let's say, pretty obvious, but like, hey, I've got this cool script. Hey, I've got a cool paycheck. Anybody interested? Of course, you know, we're going to look at that and consider that versus just, hey, I've got an idea. I'm showing up with just a pitch. Those just unsolicited general ideas, I don't think we have a workflow for right now.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you for that. Let's see. Next one is, are there any resources that you would recommend for actors training specifically for mocap? Generally, or general acting / film acting classes are obviously helpful, but are there other resources or opportunities that you would recommend to refine skills?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, get familiar with games. I think that the more games you play, the more familiar you are with the world, the easier it is to slip into that world when you need to in the auditions. I'm also going to say, rather than general classes, take really specific stuff. I mean, take a Meisner class, take a Suzuki class, do some Reiki, just get real specific methods. And the more methods you understand, and this is basic for any acting really, but the more methodology you have and the more tools you have in your toolkit, the more you can pull from them all and utilize them all in the room as needed. I hope that helps.
I love Meisner, but that's just me. Meisner's my go-to.
On that note, I had a question about acting. I feel like, and I don't want to speak for actors, but in my imagination, when you're studying acting, you're kind of imagining yourself on stage or on the screen. And I'm wondering if there are any habits that you see time and time again that you need to maybe break actors out of when they're beginning in motion capture or in video gaming?
I'm going to say that depends on the actor, but yes, I would say that each actor has their own eyebrow tell, or their own, they sigh too much, or, you know, so it's, from my perspective, and Webb and Corwin might have a different one, it's learning each actor's little tells and remembering in the room, and I actually have an actor in the room. I'll just yell out eyebrow. He'll be like, oh. So that's my perspective. Is it's individual. I don't know, Webb, how you feel about that.
Yeah, same thing for me. It's clarity, and I go, okay, and then he goes again. So yeah, each actor is different.
And even though I haven't been in their shoes, I have seen in plenty of auditions where if we can tell if there's a very filmic actor from a theater actor, because the filmic actor is not moving very much, but they have that perfect like film performance that we want. But then theater tends to be a bit bigger, and they're projecting a lot more, and we have to be like, all right, just bring it down. Just speaking to.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you guys. Webb, that one slide that you had with those 4 corners of the things that an actor needs to have just kind of blew my mind. I mean, that's just so much work for one person to have to embody. Pretty incredible. Yeah, there it is. Jeez.
It is very hard to find those people. And, you know, actors can do a lot, and actors are incredibly versatile, and many actors can do many things, but finding the actors who can do all of these things at a very high level of skill is really complicated and challenging.
Yeah, it looks like it. Well, I'm going to end on this one last question that seems fun. Does Deck 9 mean anything? Do you guys know? Where does that come from?
All right, Corwin, you're going to have to help me out here. So the name originated from one of the very first text adventure games, and the name of that game is escaping me right now.
I tried to, I saw this question, I tried to Google it, and I only saw like news about us.
I think Mark is going to fire me because I can't remember this. But basically, there was one of the original text adventure games that was released by Infocom back in the days. And you run the game at the very beginning. It has a very short introduction, and it says, you are on Deck 9. And that's where it puts you. And that's the beginning of the story. So in using that as the origin story of like, well, you know, we create narrative games, and using that as our inspiration, we decided to brand Deck 9.
Cool, thank you. And I'm also just seeing one other one. I'm wondering if you guys do any kind of studio tours or like student days where people can kind of check out what's going on, or if you're not open for that quite yet, and what your business looks like.
Take this one. So we don't do explicit tours just because the project we're working on is, you know, unannounced, and the entire studio is working on materials for that. So typically the only tours we usually do is like, you know, if we have some business like managers or people in an official capacity needing to see the studio, or even other developers who we'd like to build a relationship with. They'll sometimes tour the studio and to give us a visit. We just don't give out normal tours. It is worth noting, I didn't mention it earlier, is kind of a last slide that we have, Webb. Our day players that we bring in for motion capture sets are Script Soup and Camots. We actually bring people in locally for that. So if you are interested in being part of motion capture and actually being kind of a part of it and doing either one of those jobs we talked about before, we have some instructions here. You can email me, have the subject of what, I don't want to say that, the COFTM day player in the title, and you're welcome to reach out if you're interested in doing one of those roles. I can give you some more information on that. And in terms of acting, just do what I think Sylvia and Webb were kind of saying before. So when we have new roles come up for a project, we can hopefully see you.
Yeah, I think we have some information here for auditioning.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, so if you have an agent, if you're interested in auditioning and you have an agent, just reach out to your agent and tell them you're specifically interested in mocap stuff. And then if you're independent, you can email me, and my email address is there with the same subject, but put actor, submit your headshot and resume with a note that you're interested in Deck 9, and we can put you in our list of auditions that are upcoming whenever they happen, and they seem to happen a couple times a year.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, for everybody out there, maybe you can just take a screenshot of that and keep that if you're interested in contacting Sylvia or Deck 9. That's great. I think we're out of time. That webinar was so great, it blew my mind. Thank you guys so much for putting this all together. Do you have any like final thoughts that you want to leave us with?
No, just thank you for inviting us to do this. This is super fun. we're all geeky about what we do. We love doing this. So being able to talk about it in some capacity to the community, even despite the hard times right now, I think it's a lot of fun. So thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you guys again. And one more thing I just wanted to mention to everybody still watching, we're actually going to have Sylvia back this next coming Tuesday, April 14th. I think it's on our website already. You can register for that webinar, which is going to be kind of about the life cycle of casting and acting and what that looks like, and particularly these days when actors might be vulnerable to more things than they used to be, at least during this COVID time. So please tune in for that, register for that. And you can check out the other webinars that we've got coming up on coloradofilm.org/webinar-series. And yeah, this webinar was also recorded. I didn't mention that earlier. So if you know of anybody who'd like to check it out, they can find it on our YouTube page afterwards, which is also linked to on that website. So thanks again. Thanks to you guys. And thank you for everybody who attended.
And
Thanks, everybody.
Putting this together.
Have a great time.
All right, bye.